right. Got it where I need it to be. All right, everyone. Um, as promised, I I and now that I have a hold of the English translation of Midrash Mishlei, I want to do a little bit more relying on this um, particular composition. Didn't know much about it. I'm learning about it from the introduction that Professor Wasatsky from JTS put in the introduction. It appears to be a unique example of the nexus between Midrashic literature. Oh boy, we got a lot of people coming in late today. What's happening with your clocks, people? I guess we started a little bit earlier than usual. Okay. It comes at the end of what we call the classical Midrashic period, where midrashim of two different kinds, some homiletic, that is, that they have they're based on a sermon, synagogue sermon. Others, what we call exegetical midrashim, which are more of a play-by-play. And then at the end of, at the end of the first millennium, beginning of the second millennium, especially beginning of the second millennium, we start to get rabbinic commentaries that are structured differently and are meant to be read, even though the exegetical midrashim are play-by-play, they don't necessarily take the text as a whole, take a step back. But medieval rabbinic commentaries take a step back from the text and say, okay, so what does this mean in general? And so what Vysotsky says here is that this is at the cusp between those two periods. I haven't finished the introduction yet. Rabbi Malk, I don't know if you read the introduction to Vysotsky's English translation, which I'm not sure you got. I did get a hold of one. Still an exorbitant price, but I checked the price again today, and it was up. It was up by about 150% than what I paid for.
Did
What
I
I
get
paid
the
for.
last reasonable copy?
Yeah, mine was. I probably shouldn't say how much mine was. There is
Wow.
the treasurer of Or Hamidbar knows how much it was, but he's sworn to secrecy. Okay, so let's take a look. So that's what I tried to do. What I tried to do, and we'll do next week as well, is to utilize just Midrash Mishlei on the section. My goal, personally, as a student, is to get to know Midrash Mishlei a little bit better, get to know it at all, because I really don't know much about it. And because you are captive audience in this way, I'll just schlep you along with me. But still, I want to pay attention to, as we always do, to the contextual meaning of the words themselves, the way we have them. And there's some interesting things here, I think. Already warning you, there will be, I already caught many typos because I'm kind of touch typing as I look at his translation, and then I go over it. This is a translation that I do not try to improve upon. There's maybe one or two words that I changed, but this is a scholar who is so far beyond what the translations that I'm constantly improving upon in Sefaria are done either by other rabbis, colleagues, teachers, or our older Orthodox translations where I think they're mostly Orthodox rabbis that translated them, where their knowledge of language is not it's not an academic knowledge. So all right. Let's see. Let's begin. So, Les, you want to take it away? Let's start with the 1 through 3.
Like channeled water is the mind of the king in God's hand, for it is directed according to God's wishes. People look approvingly on their own ways, but God probes the mind. To do what is right and just is more desired by God than sacrifice.
Okay. Well, the reason these three are in a box by themselves is because this was the only unit that was easy to identify from my point of view, which has to do, what's the common denominator of each of these three sentences, three couplets?
God.
God, right. So here, Les, you often ask the question, does tzaddik or king, Well, you actually asked about king. Could king mean God in other places? We have an interesting case coming up, which is with a different word. And the answer is that when Proverbs wants to talk about God, Proverbs talks about God. Although we'll see maybe something that challenges that a few verses later. But in this section, though, it's all about God. So what do we see here that we like, we don't like, we understand, we don't understand?
I think this proverb parallels like Amos and Jeremiah in the last part, to do what is right and just is more desired by God than sacrifice.
Right, exactly. And that was the Haftarah of this last week. That
Right.
was the text that we studied, Malga, we studied Shabbat morning.
Mhm.
That text, and it's similar in there. And there are other proverbs. I didn't cite them, but there's a number of other proverbs that have this same idea. And actually, we've seen them, one or two of them already. But I think it stood out to me more than anything else because of the time we're living in, and because of that haftarah from the book of Micha. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Uh, okay. Um,
Just to clarify, so basically it's saying that whatever the king does is directed by God.
Yes, directed is a little bit different. Yeah, I guess so. Yes, directed. It's maybe the word I would use is manipulated. God manipulates kings because what's the challenge with a king? The king has ultimate power. Many of you will remember that in the book of Samuel, Samuel is upset because the people want a king like all other nations, and Samuel says to them, "But you have a king already." And then God says, "Were you looking out for me, Samuel? Or were you looking out for yourself? You're afraid your job is going to be phased out if there's a king." Um, so that's one issue, the tension between God and king. Let's not forget that we utilize king as a metaphor for God everywhere, right? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, right? Melech haolam. Malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu and shalom aleichem, the King of Kings. So the ultimate power. So this is to say, you think the king has ultimate power, but now God's pulling the strings, and we'll get to that, and the Midrash is going to expand upon that, excuse me. Yeah.
So would you say, for instance, with David's error with Bathsheba, God was directing that according?
Huh. Yeah, I'm not sure this pans out for every single, especially
Right.
since most of the kings of Israel and Judah
Or
did
bad.
not behave. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
No, I think this is a theoretical thing that's being said at a time when there probably is no king.
Mm,
If we take the Second Temple period, the king is a known entity, but it's not as if necessarily the Israelites had a king. I don't know. That would be a little bit too drastic, and I don't think it's based on anything else. But I think it's just purely a kind of a theological statement. Don't think that there is free will, but there's not that much free will.
mm,
Yeah. I like the imagery of palge mayim, right? Channels of water.
mhm,
I
Uh,
guess what I'm reflecting on is that kings, whether hereditary or appointed or elected, um, often justify what they do by saying they've been anointed by God and what they're doing is
mm,
directed by God. And I'm pushing back against that.
right. You're the subversive here today.
mm.
Okay.
And only today. You're never ever subversive.
But the king was often in Canaanite myth and in Israelite was often a representative of God, like in all those enthronement songs and royal songs.
Yeah, let's take a look. We'll take a look in a second at the Midrash, and we'll see how the rabbinic commentary expands that.
Mm.
Okay. Um, anything? I mean, the middle section is something we've had quite a bit. That God certainly knows what people's intentions are. And then Malka, any other comments about just the plain meaning of the text? Okay, so Les, why don't you read from the first selection? There's two sections here. They're broken down into the first paragraph is one section, the second two paragraphs are another. So let's do the first section first.
Like channeled water is the mind of the king in the Lord's hand. He directs
It should be
it
it.
to whatever he wishes, from Proverbs. Rabbi Ishmael expounded this verse as follows: channeled water, just as when you put water into a vessel, you can tilt it to whatever side you wish, so too when flesh and blood is elevated to kingship, his heart is placed in God's hands and may be influenced by him as he wishes. If the world merits it, God tilts the king's heart toward beneficent decrees. If the world is guilty of misconduct, God tilts the king's heart toward evil decrees. Thus, each and every decree that issues from the king's mouth originates from God. Hence, it is said, he directs it whatever he wishes, from Proverbs. Well, that's even worse.
You know, there was a game once with a wooden kind of a thing that had a maze on it with a marble, and you could tilt it in different, what was it called? Tilt or something? Did anybody remember what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't
I
remember.
think you remember.
Can't
I
think of
think
the
you
name.
remember it.
I remember the toy, but I don't remember what it was called.
Well, the thing is, you could tell that. So it's interesting. The rabbinic commentary, Rabbi Ishmael says it's like it's like a vessel, meaning like a vase or a jug of water. You can tilt this way or that way, or a bowl. Um, but that's maybe because maybe he's not familiar with, or maybe he went in a different way. The imagery that's in the text itself, it actually comes from agricultural part, right? Because of watering with channels. And is it called the sluice? You can you can change the direction of the water or the channels, or like we would think of a
With a
train.
dam, like with a dam too.
Well,
You can
so it's
channel
not a
water.
dam. It's not only to dam up. It's not really to dam up the water, so that when the water is going to the fields in different channels,
Mhm.
you can there's a wooden thing you can put so it goes into that channel as opposed to that channel. Think of like a train switching tracks, one of those kinds of things. Okay, unless the sentence attachment. Yes, you've got the game. Pacific Games goes space tilt. I remember ours as being round though. So this
That
looks
was
like
the older version. That was the older version.
yeah, this looks like it's made out of plastic. Ours was a nice wood thing. Okay, sorry, not everybody. It was just a picture of that game. Okay. All right. Anything on this paragraph that somebody would like to add?
Well, I agree
Okay.
with Wes. I don't like it.
You don't like it. Okay, so let's go on to the second section is on verse 3. And that's broken down to two paragraphs, one Rabbi Shimon, one Rabbi Yirmiyah. Go ahead.
To do what is right and just is more desired by God than sacrifice. Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, said, anyone who does what is righteous and just is accounted to God as though he had brought burnt offerings and sacrifices before him. As it is said, it is more desired by the Lord than sacrifice. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, so long as there is righteousness and justice in the world, God is more pleased than he would have been with burnt offerings and sacrifice. As it is said, it is more desired by the Lord than sacrifices. Of course, the opposite of that is true, is that if there's not righteousness and justice in the world, then God wants sacrifices.
Yes, that would be. What are both of the things saying though? What are these guys coming up with? What's the motivation of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yirmiyah?
That if you do good things, you don't have to sacrifice.
Well, that's the text, but why are they saying but that's what the text says. The plain text says that. What's their motivation for giving us that added, filling in the blanks there?
Well, they're saying that if you do sacrifice, it doesn't give you you can't do bad things.
Okay, so yeah, Harold, did you want to?
It seems to me they're saying kind of opposite things. It seems that Rabbi Eliezer says anyone who does what is righteous and just is accounted to God as though he had brought burnt offerings and sacrifices. He seems to be, I interpret that as being doing what is right and just and bringing burnt offerings and sacrifices are like equivalent to each other. But Rabbi Yirmiyah says doing what's right and just is better. than burnt offerings and sacrifices.
So I agree with you, but in both cases, it's actually, I think it's answering a heresy of sorts, in that God doesn't really want sacrifices. Because the simple meaning of the text, as it is in other prophetic places, God doesn't need your sacrifices. But the rabbis weren't willing to go in these cases. These two traditions weren't willing to say that, so they mock it up in a way that it doesn't mean exactly. It doesn't mean God doesn't want your sacrifices. It
This
means that you can't. Yeah,
mhm.
I
Sounds
think so.
post 70 to me, because you can't sacrifice. So do what's right and good.
Well, but ironically, Malka, that would be the proverb, but I don't know. Okay, all right, yeah. I think there's a defense of this the system of sacrifices here, because many of us use the verse above and verses like it to say, like Rambam, God doesn't need our sacrifices. That's a misunderstanding, human misunderstanding. Anyway, about the upper paragraph, though, I made a note here. I'm just seeing it now, that this evil decree, not evil decree, it's kind of like you get what you deserve. One might say, from a theological point of view, how do you answer the questions of the population of a country whose ruler is doing things which seem to be unjust, or look like unjust? Well, you brought it upon yourselves. I'm not no political comment here, just making a theoretical point.
So that would theoretically apply to the Holocaust?
Theoretically, yeah. And of course, there are those that said that still say that in the Haredi community.
Mhm.
I feel that we need to do the sacrifices, perform the sacrifices more than God needs the sacrifices.
All right, so you're going on to another aspect of the sacrifices themselves instead of so do we, and is that connected to good behavior?
I think it's because it's maybe hard because of our nature to always be doing what's good and right, that we feel that we need to compensate and admit that we can't perform that as much as we would like to, or we make mistakes.
So for you, the sacrifices are an answer to human wrongdoing.
I think it's more to make ourselves feel better that we're doing something, if we're not doing everything that's right, more than God needs that sacrifice.
Okay. Yeah, some might argue the whole system of mitzvot, of all the commandments, are in order to create a human being who's acting in such a way, in such a fashion that will lead that person to do good.
So maybe that's why they have the Talmud, because every day we're going to be doing something that we shouldn't.
Okay,
what,
hold on for a minute.
The daily sacrifice.
well, so I'm not sure. I don't think I agree, though, that sacrifices are only for wrongdoing. Most of the sacrifices are not
Right,
sin
that's true.
offerings, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So in other words, even the Tamid it's not to compensate on something. I don't know, but that would be the topic of something on sacrifice. I think the topic here, though, is ethical moral behavior, and also seeing the world. How do we understand when ethical moral things are happening by a king who is supposedly being controlled by God? So one way to go is what was said beforehand. Well, that person could say, see, I'm doing God's will. The other way to go is what we have here in the rabbinic tradition. Well, it must be that you people as a society are not acting well. Okay, and so and yet another comment on the first chat. This is from a different section of Midrash Mishlei, just to give you an idea how I'm working. Is that because I certainly wanted to fill up the page. That was part of it, and I had room on the page. So I looked in the index of the Midrash, of the translation of the Midrash, to see where verses of this chapter were mentioned outside of this of chapter 21, which it's organized by chapter of Proverbs. So I went outside to see where else was that one of our verses mentioned. That's why I got to Midrash Mishlei 26-25. Harold, you want to read that for us?
Sure.
This is the story of Esau and Jacob stealing the blessing, not stealing the birthright, but stealing the blessing, and Isaac not knowing what's going on exactly, or yes, knowing.
Esau ran to greet him. He embraced him, and falling on his neck, he kissed him, and they wept. He kissed him is dotted, which shows that it was a kiss not of genuine love, but one of hatred.
Okay, keep your finger there. So those dotted mean that there's points above those letters, that word in the Masoretic text in a Torah scroll, and that's been interpreted. One of the Midrashic interpretations means that his Yaakov, he came to stab Yaakov in the back of his neck. That's what it means, but it turned into ivory, or bite. He was going to bite him, and it broke his teeth, something like that. This is another variation of that. In other words, that's to show you. It's like saying he kissed him out of love, right? Air quotes. That would be the idea here. Rabbi Shimon.
Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh said, "How indeed was Esau considered at that moment as one who loved or one who hated? Obviously, as one who hated, as it is said, like channeled water in the mind of the king is in the mind of the king in the Lord's hand. He directs whatever he wishes. Thus, you learn that the evil Esau spoke to Jacob while hating him in his heart, as it is said." One speaks to his neighbor in friendship, but lays an ambush for him in his heart. Rav Shimon said, when Esau pleaded with his, sorry?
With his, should be.
When Esau pleaded with his father Isaac, saying, bless me too, father, Isaac intended to bless him as he had blessed his brother Jacob. The Holy Spirit, however, immediately diverted him by saying to him, Isaac, Isaac, have not faith in the pleadings of that wicked one, as it is said, though he be fair spoken, do not trust him, for 7 abominations are in his mind.
Okay, and now you can see why this particular tradition was brought in a different chapter, in chapter 26, because it ends with that particular verse. So Jacob here is being seen as a king. The king in this case is Jacob. Jacob bestowing, and once again, if you go back to that narrative in Genesis, Isaac is not really running the show. Either Rebekah's running the show, or in this case, or Jacob under Rebekah's tutelage, or in this case, God is pulling the strings. Comments?
What do the 3 dots mean?
What do the 3 dots? You mean over the word?
Mhm.
Oh, in the
Mhm.
biblical text.
Mhm.
I'm not sure. Is it just 3? There might be even more than 3. I think there might be 1 over every letter. But in any case, we don't know exactly. Often, in some cases, and I don't remember what the critical explanation here. In some cases, it means that a word should be deleted. The word was included into the text. I don't know if that would work here, or there's a different option for it. But I don't know offhand. I'd have to look that up in a critical commentary, or in possibly in Biblia Hebraica. One might find that in. Yeah.
Are those dots reproduced in current versions of the Torah?
Yep. Torah scroll, every printed, every chumash you've ever had, Les, has those dots in it.
Are there other places where those dots are used?
Yeah, a few others, and at least in one other place, I think you have I don't remember the example. One place I know it's thought of as to delete that word.
So is it like a shoshelet?
No. Shalshelet is one of
It's
the
3
tropes.
dots, right? A triangle?
Oh, Shalshelet is a trope with a certain sign, right?
That's
Yeah.
not what's over that then.
No. These are, you know what? Let's just pull it up so everybody can see. It is over.
He kissed
Oh,
him. Here it is. It's over every letter in the word.
Mhm. So it could be here, one maybe should delete it. That could be the answer, because this makes sense. Vayipol tzavaro vayivku. And about falling on his neck or embracing him, that's a euphemism for embracing a right? They wept. But if we were to look here and see, for instance,
What Rashi has to say.
I would try Sofrim, Masechet Sofrim. Here we go. Let's move this over. How do I do this? All right, Malka, you want to read this?
10 letters or groups of letter in the Torah are marked by dots. In the Lord judge between me and thee, there is a dot on the bait. Ubeneka and between thee. And they said to him, there are dots on Aleph Yod Wav of Elav unto him, and he knew not when she lay down nor when she arose. The second Vav in what is that?
Uvekuma.
Bakuma, when she rose, right, is marked with a dot. In and kissed him. The
What's
entire
the Torah
word.
to say? So, it just gives us the text where it is. Go ahead.
Right.
All right, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to. I lost. Oh, the entire word, but Yishhakehu is sometimes it's harder to read in transliteration. Is marked by
Most
dots.
times it is.
And his brethren went to feed their father's flock.
Yeah.
The
So
letter,
this just gives us lots of
right, the
other
examples,
explanations, but doesn't
but
tell
it
us
doesn't
exactly
tell us
why.
why.
In this case, so let's see if we can find, let's go to Rashi and see what Rashi says. I think that Rashi is going to bring the one about the. Go ahead, why don't you read this?
And he kissed him. Dots are placed above the letters of this word, and a difference of opinion is expressed in the Baraita of Sifrei as to what these dots are intended to suggest. Some explain the dotting as meaning that he did not kiss him with his whole heart. Whereas Rav Shimon, the son of Yohai, said, it is not well known that Esau hated Jacob, but at that moment in his pity was really aroused, and he kissed him with his whole heart.
And that's the one we like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this, of course, doesn't give us any a critical explanation. For that, I'd have to leave my place here and go get a book and open it up. But I'll try to do.
Do we have any idea when some editor added those dots?
No, but we know it was before, say, like the 10th century. I think the earliest manuscripts we have are from the 10th century. It's an educated guess. I don't remember exactly. And so if they appear there, but no, why do I have to go there? The dots appear in the 2nd century of the Common Era, because that's when the traditions are from. So it's before that. So we don't know before that, but we know it's not after that. So sometime, let's just say, round it off, sometime BCE. I guess the interesting thing would be to see if I doubt it, I probably would remember this, if there was a Genesis text in Qumran in the Dead Sea Scrolls, if it had the dots there. My guess is that's not the case there. But those are good questions. I just don't. I'd have to spend an hour or so looking into it. I will try to do so for next week. Okay.
Rabbi, I have Alter opened because
Yeah.
I was curious.
Great.
And what he says is the Masoretic text has both brothers weeping, the verb showing a plural inflection, but some scholars have conjectured that the plural vav at the end of the verb is a scribal error duplicated from the first letter of the next word in the text, and that Esau alone weeps, Jacob remaining impassive. So that's Alter's take.
It's a
Okay,
typo.
So
A
yeah,
typo.
so then the dots, according to Alter, would be, and he's echoing other scholars, I'm sure, would be that there is a typo. The typo isn't that the whole word needs to be taken out of the text, but just that vav at the end.
Yeah.
Good.
Why
Thank
don't
you.
they just do a Kareya and a Kativ then, instead of the dots?
Don't know. There's far more creative. Creative means that you read it it's written one way,
Right.
but you read it another way. We have a number of those that we don't, I'm not an expert. We don't know a lot about the origins of the scribal notations that we have. There are medieval commentators that tell you exactly what, but we don't know it's hard to know exactly when. I'm sure there are entire articles in the Journal of Biblical Literature and such that have been devoted to this particular word with these dots. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing. One thing to do would be to look what's in the Greek, the Septuagint here. What does that reflect? Because that reflects a text of the 2nd century BCE. Yeah, so all of these are interesting questions, but what's for sure is that those kinds of unique or oddities in the text of the Torah were just we say in Hebrew a keresh kfitza, a diving board. They were a diving board for the rabbis to expand upon. It was just giving them a place to hang their hat, so to speak. Yeah, a diving board. Okay. All right. Dan, would you please read 4 to 7?
Haughty looks, a proud heart. The tillage of the wicked is sinful. The plans of the diligent make only for gain. All rash haste makes only for loss. Treasures acquired by a lying tongue are like driven vapor, heading for extinction. The violence of the wicked sweeps them away, for they refuse to act justly.
Okay. It feels like each of these are different things, right? They're not necessarily, they're not really related one to another, but at some point I just decided to do, 4 or 5 verses, and that's the maximum. Tillage, is that a word that we use a lot, tillage? Because none of us have gardens.
Yeah, I use it every day.
It's interesting because, it caught my tillage, not a word. So, I look in English, I went back to the Hebrew. I had originally read because I have my glasses on, but what's the first word of the second line? What would most of us who read Hebrew read right away?
Air.
Ner. We'd
Ner.
read ner because the more common word is ner, as in light or candle or lantern. The less common word is near, except for because near in modern Hebrew is always written with a yud. Near means what does a plow do? A furrow. A furrow, yeah, a furrow. But apparently near is in virgin soil. That's what. In other words, it's not one. The first time you plow a piece of land, and the reason we know Israelis know near. First of all, it's a name.
Yeah.
It's a name for a boy's name, Nir. Nir Barkat was the now member of Knesset, was the mayor of Jerusalem, a high-tech guy. We have a good friend, Nir, yeah, very good friend, very close friend of our families. But also because there are a number of settlements, can't use that word. There are a number of communities, farms / communal farm, moshavim, kibbutzim, that have the first word near Yitzchak, near Galim, right near the yeshiva I went to was a place called Nir Galim, which was settled by Hungarian Bnei Akiva people. And my best friend, who I went to yeshiva with, he had his parents' friends from Hungary, and Bnei Akiva were there, so we went to visit there quite a bit. And it's called Nir Galim. It's the tillage of the waves because it's close to the seashore. Anyway, so what does it mean though? So that now, whether it's, let's assume it's near, as this translation does. So it means the haughty looks proud heart, right? Romeinaim, another way to understand Rome is to lift up. When you're doing this with your nose in the air, we'd say in English, right? It's a type of being haughty, snobby, I guess.
I like rolling your eyes. That's what I thought it meant.
Room. I don't know rolling. Yeah,
Like
and
you roll your eyes or something.
yeah, we do that, and we have that means something in our culture. I don't know if I've seen that in like rabbinic or biblical literature. The rolling of eyes away. It's got to be something. But room literally means to lift up.
Oh.
Yeah, like bamarom yilamdu alehem v'aleinu, or romamu means to lift up. Truma, the word truma is taken from that truma, which means a donation, which you lift up a donation, truma. Yeah.
The truma.
Yeah, laharim yadayim is to raise your hands. Okay. Anyway, rum einayim u'rechav lev. Now, rechav lev literally means wide heart. I would think rechav lev, he has a big heart, a wide heart. But in the context here, it can't mean that. In the context, it's got to be an issue of being proud. So then we get to the second part. So what does that mean? That anything that the wicked plot, maybe we would say, plot or plan as they plow, anything the wicked plow, that is sinful. He's got a whole page on this in Fox. He had a real issue with this, and he read instead, Ner Rishaim Chatat, that that whatever between the haughty looks and the proud heart, it's the sins of a wicked, not sinful, but sin chatat seen as a noun and not as a adjective, adverb, sinful, sinfully, as a not as an adjective. So the sins of the wicked are the sins are the wicked's lantern, as opposed to God being the lantern, the soul being the lantern in a positive sense. I mean, it doesn't really change the meaning so much, but it's just an example of how we've seen a number of examples in Proverbs of how there's different readings, especially when the vowels are changed. So back to your question, Les, the vowels that we have are the same as from the same tradition that gave us the dots above that word in the previous section, also give us the vowels, and different consonants can be written in many different ways depending on the vowels. But the vowels, the text we have in the Torah scroll, of course, is just the vowels. It's just the consonants. There are no vowels, and there's no trope. All those things are part of that same tradition that we call the Masoretic text, the Masoretis, were the ones, the Balei HaMasorah, the ones, the masters of tradition. And there are people that have written extensively about it. I was never terribly interested in it because for me it's a late development in the text. I was always kind of I could have been more interested in it, I guess. Maybe because one of the teachers that I had who emphasized that the must was probably the teacher I respected the least in the Bible department. That could have something to do with it. I just didn't like him at all. A younger guy, he wasn't a professor. But I would say that, all right, enough said about that. And we'll see something, same kind of a problem coming up. We have we've had a number of textual issues. If we were studying, by the way, the book of Samuel, we would have had far more. Samuel is known to be really problematic from the text that we have. It's a faulty text somehow, more than say Kings, and Kings is just the second half of Samuel. So something happened to that whole block of text of Samuel where the text, there's a lot of faulty traditions that can be shown because we have Dead Sea Scrolls, we have the Greek translation, because sentences don't necessarily make sense. Okay. All right, what else we got here? Lines 3 and 4 sound familiar to anybody with different words in a different formula?
Haste makes waste.
Exactly. Haste makes waste. Okay, so I'm dealing with the question of artificial intelligence lately. One, because I read a really good book about in general about it's called Searches. I may have mentioned it before. Personhood in the internet age, in the age of internet, something like that. And a lot of it is the author's interaction with ChatGPT and feeding it the text that she's written and getting responses back. And they were broken down into different essays. Really, really fascinating. That and the whole question that people are talking about it a lot. It came up when it first started to come out. Rabbis were talking about, they tried to write a sermon with it. Some people are very happy. I know somebody who was never terribly vocal on social media, who suddenly perked up like last year and is right and these long posts about it. And I looked at right away, this isn't this guy. I know him. He doesn't have that kind of vocabulary. He's not that intellectual. He doesn't read, a tremendous amount. And then I realized that that's what he does. There are a number of people that are using it. What I'm experimenting with is the search feature, which is not ChatGPT. I've tried that as well. That's challenging as well. When it first came out, I tried it right away with things that I know about, and then I realized it just didn't have a broad enough input. And of course, it all depends what's put in, what's not put in. That book that I mentioned before talks about that. By the way, it's totally off point, but one of the reasons I'm also thinking about AI is a novel that I'm reading now, and so I can read the next novel of the same author, who is the co-owner of the bookstore. I don't know if any of you in Palm Springs saw the social media about that stuff, and they've become very good friends of mine. The two owners, they're partners as well in life. And Paul, whose book is coming out next week, his second novel is totally revolves around AI and a murder, I think. But even his previous book from a few years ago, which I'm reading now, I'm just catching up with that. So I'm dealing a lot with this question. What I'm using AI for lately is just a chat. There's a chat you can activate AI enhanced chat, and especially in things that I know about, because that's where you can see where it takes you down a wrong path. Everybody's talking about there's lots of problems. So this is what I did. I typed in, what is the history of the phrase haste makes waste, and it came up with the earliest mention is in the I didn't, it doesn't matter. Something like the earliest mention is in the 2nd century in the apocryphal Book of Wisdom. And what we call Wisdom of Solomon in at least in Jewish circles. I think it has another name in Christian circles, perhaps. In any case, it's one of those apocryphal books like Judith and Maccabees, etc. And then it goes on to talk about who used it and Benjamin Franklin has a phrase that's similar to this. Different people did. Of course, it makes sense, but of course that's a wrong answer, because this and other verses like it in Proverbs that I hadn't noticed until looking at the commentary today. The idea, it doesn't say haste makes waste, but it's the same idea. So then I typed in Wisdom of Solomon, haste makes waste, and what I got from from the AI enhanced search was that in the Wisdom of Solomon, that is the book of Proverbs, mostly the book of Proverbs, which is attributed to Solomon, there is no exact quote, but one might think that it's connected to this and this verse, and this is one of the verses. Well, that's also not a good answer. Again, as a Jewish studies student and teacher, that's not because I would like the students to get to Wisdom of Solomon, to get to that apocryphal text. I know I'm not being entirely clear about this, and I haven't thought it out, and I'm not going to write about it, but I do want to say that I think it's worthwhile, usually because sometimes you get some really good answers, then you get to answers that it would have taken you much longer to find on your own. The last thing I will say about searches is that there's a big difference between searching on what's it called, DuckDuck.
Mm.
Do people know what I'm talking about?
DuckGo?
Yeah,
Duck.
yes. Say it again, Madeline.
So,
DuckGo, is it?
Yeah, DuckGo. So DuckGo in general is a better search engine to use, because they can't follow you the same way they do on Google. At least they're not supposed to be able to. I don't know what's in reality. But your searches are limited. If you go to Google, you often get a much wider search, and that's just again, in knowing something about thing, or knowing that something's online and can't find it one way. So yeah, all right.
What would the rabbis at the Talmud say about AI? What do you think?
I wish I had right away a pithy kind of a phrase from Chazal, from the rabbis, but to me, it's like in the same way that haste makes waste, is something akin to there are no shortcuts.
Mm.
Of course there are indices, and there's a glossary, there's all sorts of things, but the bottom line is and that's why I think I can usually tell when somebody has written something in a topic that I know about, but also not, but certainly a topic I know about, which you could just smell that you can smell the style. I mean, I don't know if people have experimented with it or see people, you just see. By the way, in most of the AI's, the ChatGPT's analysis of this woman's novel or things that essays that she had written, it was just saying, it was what's the word? Not placating, wanting to find favor. There's a good word that people use.
Smoozing.
Say it again.
I said sometimes we smooze people when we want to find, you want to.
Yeah, schmooze is it, but so basically, yeah, the Chat GPT is schmoozing you. It's trying to say things you want to hear. Yeah, it's interesting topic. So what but if I was working with rabbis today, I would try to work with them because they're going to use it, right? Everybody's going to use it, is to work with ways that I would call responsible ways. In the same way that decades ago, I worked with students on what are responsible ways of using even before Google, right? Of using the internet. What are the ways that that will help you? What are the ways that are a simple thing is when I work with especially converts that are constantly looking up stuff, they don't have the library at home, they don't have the background of Hebrew school or family education that many of us got. Those of us who were born into Jewish homes, and so warning is not a good word, but pointing out that much of what you Google sometimes you're getting answers from whoever's really done their what's it called, Madalena, when you do your site right to get on the Google thing?
Oh,
You pay somebody to put you on the
Well,
top of
we pay
Oh, the
Madalena
tag.
to do it. That's what we pay Madalena for. She does that for. That's why Oremy Bar comes up right away when people put Jewish Palm Springs. Oremy Bar comes up.
Oh, yes, the Google search.
The Google, but there's what do you call it? Not tag words or whatever those words are.
Oh, the XML map.
Thank you. XML map. Yeah. So there's things you can do, but so Chabad has done it really well.
They
And so
do.
you'll probably never look for something in Jewish tradition that at least one of the first 4 or 5 won't be Chabad. It used to be that the people that did really well were the Messianic Jews. And that happens, I don't see that coming up anymore, but for about maybe, well, I think when I was in Sweden. So 15 years, 15 years ago, they got on the bandwagon right away. So you'd look up something and then you get one of their sites and you wouldn't necessarily know, but then you get down to the blessing of a particular mitzvah. And then somehow Yeshua comes into the formula. So yeah. Okay. All right. Enough. This is Beetle Torah that we've strayed enough from the topic. Let's go. Dan, why don't you go ahead 8 to 12 for us? Continue.
Person's way may be tortuous and strange, though their actions are blameless and proper. Dwelling in the corner of a roof is better than a contentious wife in a spacious house. The desire of the wicked is set upon evil. Their neighbors find no favor in their eyes. When scoffers are punished, the simple are edified. When sages are taught, they gain insight. The righteous one observes the house of a wicked person and subverts the wicked to their ruin.
Okay. A lot to say here. Anybody want to start with something? All right, let's take the first 2 lines. Let's do them by order, and then we'll. So one thing that comes up here, I mean, I think we understand. It's understood, but there's a few things that have been pointed out. Number one is, let me to make a comment. You know that Hebrew is a gendered language. So if you have a noun and it's modified, then the modifying word has to be of the same gender. I can remember a time when I was in a class with Professor Moshe Greenberg of blessed memory, who was one of the greatest scholars, Bible scholars of the 20th century. I'm not exaggerating, really recognized as such, and was a quintessential teacher, pedagogue. And it was me and 2 other students from the program, and about 18 women who were teachers who were auditing auditing, or we call them free listeners, right? They had a sabbatical year, or they were teachers, so they'd come in, and he had a policy that he would only interact with the real students, which he called. So that meant that the three of us had to read from the text every time. I was sweating nervously to read correctly into. He had a specified way of how we were supposed to prepare the text with which commentaries. We were expected. I was humiliated time after time there. In any case, once he used the word derech and modified. Derech means way, and modified it with in the masculine. And one of the teachers corrected him, like Israelis are wont to do. Richard really only corrects me when I ask him to, I think. But who I don't think any of you, none of, Les, you're kind of a corrector, I think. If I mispronounce a word, I think you feel, and that's good. People should definitely feel comfortable. I mispronounce and I misunderstand more in English than I understand and pronounce correctly, perhaps. But Israelis are notorious for correcting you, notorious. And so one of the women corrected him, and then the whole place is quiet. He looks off out the window, as he often did, kind of strokes his beard, and he says, and do you really think that I don't know the possibilities of Hebrew language, and that perhaps derech can be either masculine or feminine? And I think this woman never returned to class. And this is a good example. Derech in Hebrew, those that speak Hebrew here, derech today in modern Hebrew is thought of as a feminine word. Derech aruka, the way is long. Derech yafa, it's a beautiful road, a beautiful way. And here is hafachfach, not hafachfechet, hafachfach, that is farblungent, torturous here. Lafoch means to turn over. Is in masculine. And then and then you have this ish, so in other words, the derech ish, the way of a man, the way of a person, is torturous, a person's way. Then you have this word vazar, and if it's not pointed this way, in other words, that these three consonants, but the vowels are slightly different, then it would be indeed strange, which means that the translators here, they amended the dots, which is not a big emendation, not a big change. But Fox kind of goes on quite a bit and says it doesn't really fit here for many ways. Instead, he suggests, I think he goes with many scholars that say that really it's what we call a ditography, that the scribe wrote the same word twice, because if you look on the beginning of the next line, it's vav, zayin, chaf, and a resh is just a shorter chaf in writing. So you can see how the two words, and so he translates only here, a person's way is torturous, because the way the way zar is pointed here, it means a strange person. It means a stranger. It would mean it's xenophobic, perhaps. Anyway, now I understand that kind of a little bit too complicated, perhaps, for this framework, but this is just another example of this text that often needs to be amended, changed, updated. So, okay. So anything about the content of the first two lines?
Sort of don't judge a book by its cover. What you see may not be what's really going on.
Well, it could be that. It could also be that, yes, that is an aspect of the second, perhaps the second level of that would be.
Person may have gone about it the wrong way, but their intentions were good.
Yeah. So their actions are blameless and proper. It doesn't say intentions. It says pa'alo from full, right? Or actions. In other words, it could also be everybody's doing it right, but they still mess up. Right? They went through the process the way it's supposed to go, and still it failed.
But they meant well.
Yeah, they meant well. They also
meant well. Mm-hmm.
But it's not only it meant well, is they want to do well. They need to survive. It could be that somebody's, in other words, somebody's suffering from being homeless and sick and this, and And even though, what is this guy? I'm not reading, I'm listening. I used to think listening was a shortcut and was cheating, but you know, I'm driving so much between LA and here. I'm listening to books, and also the bookstore gets a cut of if you get books not from Audible but from Libro. And so I'm now listening / reading the book called Abundance. It is by Ezra Klein and a colleague of his. It's really, really good. It's a super good book. And it talking now about, you know, how could it be that if in certain cases, the United States especially has done the right steps. In other words, they've done the right steps, and still, how do people become homeless, for instance, right? How somebody could have done everything right, yet they still could end up on the street and die of a young age or be hit by a car or whatever it is. So no, hit by a car wouldn't fit this, but be on the street, I guess. Okay, so the second couplet. I think you paused while you were reading this, Dan. I know you were savoring each word. Would you want to have first crack at it? What is dwelling on the corner of the roof? What would that be?
Having
Small apartment.
Being
Yeah,
very
so
minimal accommodations, not not lavish surroundings, not abundance.
okay, and why? So the scenario that he sets up here, which is the truth is I got it right away because I associated it to a movie I watched last week with Brad Pitt. It's an old movie where he plays a spy, and they meet in Egypt, and anyway she turns out to be working for the I don't want to say the end of it, whatever it's called, the movie. And so they're in Morocco, and they're pretending to be husband and wife, and she says, now you have to go up on the roof because that's what men do after they've been away for a long time. They sleep with their wife, they lie with their wives, and they go up on the roof. This idea of living on the roof. But here it's being pushed to the corner of the roof. You're in the corner because this person's been forced out of their house by this contentious woman. Interesting. Fox mentions a commentator named Murphy, and I have the book, but I can't find it. I bought it when we started Proverbs, and I haven't. I stopped using it to prepare with for whatever reason. So apparently, a feminist scholar who's asking the question, how come we only hear about contentious wives and not about contentious husbands? And Fox indulges her here and says, well, because we know that this literature was written by men. We know that. That's not really a relevant question. And he says, and who knows what collections didn't reach our hands of women's proverbs, right? That are about contentious men that have driven their wives out to the street or onto the roof. The interesting thing here is the Beit Hever or Beit Chaver at the end of the fourth line, the house of a friend, a spacious house. There's in the 1950s a scholar, very famous scholar named Albright, suggested that it's an ale house because in Akkadian there's the same kind of phrase. The house of is a brewery. My first reaction was to say that it's a scribal error, and it instead should be ubait rachav, resh chet bet, 3 letters, just the last letter put back in the. But it could be a community house. In other words, and there could be the translation here is correct in assuming that when you want to say, oh, they have a mansion, they have a community house. What do we say? You know, they live in a barn. No, that's not okay. Oh boy, I think I talked a little bit too much today. So let's just finish up this section, and then we'll start next week with this. And
when I heard Dan read it, my thought was, it depends on how spacious the spacious house is.
It depends on how contentious the contentious wife is.
Well, yeah, but if it's a very contentious wife and it's an extremely spacious house, you just move into another wing.
Unless she's extremely contentious.
I think that it's a person wanting to seek a quiet place. for example, with as many children as I had, I used to find refuge in my sewing room. You know, just finding, that's the corner of the roof for me.
It's like the way I use Gray Coffee House when our grandchildren are here.
Doesn't
Yeah,
the corner of the
That is
roof,
provided that they're open.
doesn't the corner of the roof imply some danger though? Because if
No,
you're on the corner of the roof, you could fall off very easily.
Okay, hold on just a second.
Except in those days, I think they had railings around the roof.
I don't think so.
Oh,
No,
really?
the truth of the matter is, it's a mitzvah. It's one of the 613 mitzvah to put a railing on your roof. Okay, you know what, guys, I've got to get to I've got to open up the gate for somebody. We'll go back. Well, I'll do this whole page will be the first page of next week, and we'll see. It just takes as long as it takes.
Okay.
But thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next week we're meeting, but the week after, I've got to, I have a funeral. Yes, the funeral is planned from now until then. Okay. But good to see everybody.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.